Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, China launches its third and largest aircraft carrier so far. We look at what it means for naval power in the Pacific. And the Marines are planning fundamental changes to how the Corps fights. But is a redesign putting it on the right path? Two retired commanders weigh in. Also, the Army looks for a way to keep power flowing to all the tech and gadgets given to troops. And do you think you know the facts about D-Day pretty well? You might think again after our history expert breaks down common myths about the Normandy invasion. Finally, we get a report from one of the biggest defense trade shows of the year, France's Eurosatory. It's the latest in news and analysis from the Pentagon to the platoon, here on Defense News Weekly. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Andrea Scott. China has launched its newest and largest aircraft carrier ever. At the same time, countries from around the world displayed their latest defense capabilities at the Eurosatory conference. We kick it off this week with some of the biggest headlines from around the defense world. Welcome to Defense Dollars. We have a few headlines from the Eurosatory conference last week in Paris. Combining manned and unmanned assets will open a, quote, new field of capabilities for France's next-generation helicopter programs. That's according to a senior French military official at the show. A general engineer for armaments second class at the French Procurement Office told Defense News that as the nation's army goes ahead to field 3 new rotary wing platforms by 2025, the ability to partner those systems with autonomous and semi-autonomous technology will be a game changer. He added that those 3 programs, to develop the H-160M Gepard Joint Light Utility Helicopter, to perform midlife upgrades on the NH-90 Cayman multi-role aircraft, and to launch the Tiger Mark III upgraded attack helicopter, will be the first time the French Army has multi-capabilities on helicopters. A colonel who sits on the French Army staff said that the manned-unmanned teaming capability fits squarely into the Army's Scorpion program, a broad modernization plan to field new capabilities by 2040. Polish Armaments Group has signed a memorandum of understanding at Eurosatory with South Korean firm Hyundai Rotem to develop and manufacture the K2PL tank for Poland's military. Amid Russia's ongoing invasion of Ukraine, Poland is accelerating efforts to acquire South Korean defense equipment. It is looking to take advantage of the Asian nation's mass production capacity and lenient policy toward technology transfers. The NATO member shares a border with Ukraine, as well as the Russian enclave of Kaliningrad. Government and industry sources told Defense News that Poland also has talks with Hyundai Rotem to buy hundreds of K2 Black Panther tanks for its army. Polish Defense Minister Mariusz Błaszczak discussed during a June 13th meeting with military leadership his weapons wish list, which includes Korean main battle tanks, self-propelled guns, and infantry fighting vehicles. The ministry had visited the Asian nation in late May to discuss the supply of South Korean combat vehicles and fighter jets. Germany's Rheinmetall unveiled its Panther main battle tank at the Eurosatory exhibition, adding a new angle to the discussion about a next-generation tank for Europe. The Panther is the product of the company's own years-long development, a risk that appears to have previously paid off with its lighter brother, the Lynx infantry fighting vehicle. The Lynx has become a serious contender in acquisition races worldwide. Weighing in at 59 tons, the fully digitized Panther features a 130mm cannon, compared with a 120mm weapon on the Leopard 2, which has been the German Army's go-to tank since the 1980s. The company says the larger, heavier projectiles would deliver over 50% greater effectiveness at significantly longer ranges. It also features the ability to launch drones and loitering munitions. Israel's defense ministry announced that in 2023, it will begin testing an unmanned combat vehicle armed with a 30mm autonomous turret. The unveiling of the medium robotic combat vehicle comes in the wake of Israel announcing it is acquiring the Najiva combat vehicle for its special forces from Israel Aerospace Industries. France's military procurement office has qualified the medical evacuation version of its new Griffin multi-role armored vehicle. That announcement was made at the Eurosatory conference by its industry partner Nexter. While VBMR Griffin vehicles have been rolling off the production line since 2019, the first Griffin SAN, indicating sanitary, will be delivered in 2023. Nexter, Arcus, and Thales are co-building the Griffins for the French Army. The SAN variant will support the recovery and evacuation of injured personnel on the battlefields. And now let's take a look at Asia. China has launched its third and largest aircraft carrier to date at a shipyard in Shanghai, the first of its type there to feature a catapult aircraft launch system. The ship, which was indigenously designed and built, was christened as the Fujian, named after the Chinese province opposite Taiwan. That's according to state-run news agency Xinhua. It was launched last Friday at the Shanghai shipyard, where it had undergone construction since 2018. A satellite photo taken June 15th of the dry dock at Shanghai's Sangsing Island and provided to Defense News by Planet Labs showed the narrow basin had already been flooded, indicating the launch was imminent. The Fujian, which previously was known as the Type 003, has a flight deck that measures a little more than 1,000 feet long. The dimensions are roughly the same as the U.S. Navy's Kitty Hawk-class carriers. The installation of 3 catapults on its flight deck would allow the new ship to launch heavier aircraft, such as the Xi'an KJ-600 turboprop airborne early warning aircraft, which is currently undergoing flight tests. And that's it from the defense world this week. When we come back, 2 former Marine generals weigh in on a proposed Marine Corps force redesign. Welcome back. The soldier of the near future isn't fully armed when loading magazines. They also need batteries. Lots of batteries. To power up all the tech-heavy gear rigged to their bodies and vehicles to make them a modern fighting force, troops need a lot of juice when heading to the field, which presents a problem. How do you keep everything charged up when you go to the fight? Todd South shows us what the Army is doing.
So the Army has a problem. It's got a lot of equipment coming online, a lot of that's going to go on soldiers' bodies or into vehicles, and sometimes that gear is going to have to be integrated between the vehicles or platforms and the soldiers' bodies themselves and their gear. They got to manage all that power. Lots of batteries, lots of power going a lot of different places to run all this interesting technology. To get after that, the Army has recently selected 4 companies to provide different types of concepts. So each going to get about $100,000 each to go after one of their concepts for their particular lane of this technology development. The first one is Aperius. They have a smart power technology platform. It provides precision control for smart devices and for different types of electronic charging, power density, and high power efficiency. Another one, Resonant Link, does wireless charging mostly for medical devices and electric fleets. So think electric vehicles out there away from the power grid, but still have to charge things on board, perhaps like an ambulance with a defibrillator or other types of medical equipment. That could come in real handy for a field testing or field exercise for a soldier who can't be near a plug-in power supply. Another one is the Spark Thermionics. It basically is creating a quote-unquote power plant on a chip. So what it does is it does fuel flexibility with all kinds of different sources of fuel to create electric energy, but uses very smart technology and computer chips to manage that power distribution and power generation. Lastly, we have Xerion Advanced Battery. They're basically looking to step change or really have a significant improvement in lithium-ion battery use, development, and durability. Lithium-ion batteries are pretty common now. They're basically pretty much all the rechargeable batteries you're going to come across from your smartphone to what's in your radio pack out there in the field. However, they do have some drawbacks and some downsides. They are basically vulnerable to aging. They can short circuit in transit. They also are not quite as robust as some other batteries, although they are better in terms of providing higher power and higher voltage. They can heat up. They can be overcharged or create too much discharge, basically losing life, which is part of the aging process that can be vulnerable to basically wear and tear. And that's a big problem with a field exercise or deployments in an actual combat scenario. So while there's still good technology, that company, Xerion Advanced Battery, is looking to improve that technology as we speak. And the efforts they're doing really with these different prototypes and these different concepts is going to help a lot of different areas in the Army. Right now they have cross-functional teams that are focused on a wide variety of priorities for the Army to modernize, one of which of course is soldier lethality. Soldier lethality is really focusing on equipment and gear worn by the soldier, on the soldier, used for the soldier individually or in the squad level. Also, you have a cross-functional team looking at the network. Basically, how are we going to network and connect all these different devices from a variety of platforms across time zones and have them all sync up. Some of this power distribution is going to be key to that. Also, the C4ISR, or basically cyber and intelligence surveillance reconnaissance groupings, they really have to figure out how to use power effectively to keep loitering drones on station, to communicate effectively, and also to provide power for all new types of platforms coming into the portfolio. One area of improvement that this is also going to apply to that we've reported on before is the adaptive squad architecture. Essentially, it's going to be pretty much what runs all the things on the soldier. It's going to be deciding where power goes, say, to a weapon or to an optic or to a radio, and basically managing all that out there in the field. In addition to that, the architecture will also contain software applications that will help manage those things and provide information, situational awareness, and whatever the soldier needs in terms of intelligence or data. To get after that, the Army has created Watchtower, which is basically kind of its own little Apple application store just for DoD applications. Basically, developers can create certain types of software applications, put them in the store, and then commanders can kind of pick and choose, pull those down into the platform and see if that works for them, whether they're an airborne unit, an armored unit, or any other kind of Army unit that might need some kind of specific tailored solution within software. So these 4 companies going after these 4 areas of technology for the Army Application Lab are essentially going to be folding into some goals that the Army has that are big picture goals but complicated and hard to get to sometimes. And that is essentially giving the soldier an off-grid power source that's reliable, reducing the weight of whatever that soldier's carrying, be it in a vehicle or on their body, and basically making everything more efficient all around. For Military Times, this has been Todd South.
And in news from around the Marine Corps, the plan to reshape the force has drawn a lot of debate since Commandant General David Berger began outlining his plan in 2019. Dubbed Force Design 2030, the Corps will tie the Marines closer to the Navy and change the way it fights and is deployed in conflict. But some say the new direction is flawed and ignores a number of theaters where Marines would be expected to fight. Recently, I spoke with retired Marine Generals Tony Zinni and Jack Sheehan about the force redesign and why they're speaking out against it. Here's part of that conversation.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here today.
Sure. Great to be here.
General Zinni, tell me what is concerning you most about the Marine Corps' direction right now.
Well, there's several things. I mean, one is obviously the questioning by the leadership in the Marine Corps of our relevance, our ethos, our identity, kind of the sudden decisions made on divestitures and structure cuts, deeming the Marine Corps not trained, organized, equipped, or postured to meet the threat. And then the way all this has occurred, and I'll focus on that maybe a little bit more. Immediately upon taking office, General Berger right away challenged the very existence of the Marine Corps, its identity, felt it wasn't relevant, claimed to know things that nobody else did, and began making decisions immediately, divestitures of tanks, divestitures of our bridging capability, heavy engineers, divestitures in structure, cutting infantry battalions, cutting artillery units, seeking new missions, identifying the Marine Corps as a reconnaissance, counter-reconnaissance service, saying we should go back to our roots to being fleet Marine forces under the fleet.
General Sheehan, the main rebuttal we're hearing from the Marine Corps is that they're seeing classified information that you guys just aren't seeing. What do you have to say to that?
That's not accurate. The number of people who are serving on this ad hoc board, if you want it, all have clearances. We have talked to combatant commanders who knew nothing about this process. You talk to the intelligence community, there are only 4 threats out there, plus a couple of other things they're worried about. 1 is China, 2 is Russia, 3 is Iran, 4 is North Korea. This concept that's currently being flogged around is basically a maritime interdiction force with a rocket-based kinetic solution. That is not applicable in the Korean scenario. It's not applicable in the Iranian solution, and very sincerely doesn't work in Europe. It's only going to work in one location.
Is there any validity to the back to the sea concept? I know some people would say that the Marine Corps is a second army, a second land army. Is there a problem with the focus of back to the sea? And what do you think this does to the Marine Corps culture, as you were saying?
There's no such thing as, well, we're back to our roots or back to the naval. Every service, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, is a full up paid component. They are required to provide forces to the joint land component, maritime component, special operations component, or air component, or to be the basis or contribute to a joint task force. Unique to the Marine Corps is we have a special relationship with the Navy, but that is just one part of what we do. We're not returning to the 50s and 60s. We have taken on a more significant role in some of these war plans. We have a full up core level commitment, multi-division, multi-wing commitment because of the kind of fight we have.
What solutions do you see moving forward? And what are you guys specifically calling on the Marine Corps to do right now?
We don't think this current structure meets the combatant commander's requirements. So number one, there has to be an outside independent look at what this structure can do in the Iranian situation, North Korean situation, in Russia. Number two, internally the Marine Corps. The system has to understand what it's doing. As General Zinni said, we talk to a lot of people and they are confused. And the Marine Corps' tradition is if a corporal doesn't understand what you're trying to do, he doesn't understand what the mission intent is. If he doesn't have that, he won't be as effective as he can be. This is about a fire team leader, squad leader, platoon commander, battery commander, knowing what they're going to do. Because as General Zinni said, headquarters of Marine Corps is not an operational command. They are an administrative command. The only thing the commandant really runs is drum and bugle corps and the band.
When we come back, advice from our financial expert on the ins and outs of a home equity line of credit. And later, myths about D-Day busted by our history expert. Welcome back. In this edition of Money Minute, Navy Federal Credit Union personal finance expert Jeanette Mack talks you through how to understand a home equity line of credit. Let's check it out.
Home equity is the value built up in your home from either paying down the principal on your mortgage or the value of your home increased, or both. Having equity in your home gives you options for those times when you may need an influx of cash. There are two ways to tap the equity in your home: a fixed-rate equity loan or a home equity line of credit, called a HELOC. A fixed-rate equity loan is pretty straightforward. You're borrowing a certain amount of funds based on the equity you've built in the home at a fixed rate, which means your rate won't ever change. A HELOC is quite different. They're a smart option for people looking to spend as they go, only paying for what they borrow when they borrow. And they usually have a lower interest rate when compared to personal loans. You can use an equity loan or a HELOC for most any purpose, but most people use them for home improvements, debt consolidation, or college tuition. Just remember, getting an equity loan or a HELOC means your home is your collateral, so be sure you can afford the extra payment on top of your mortgage monthly. To get started, talk with your bank or credit union. A good one will help you make the right choice for your needs and your budget.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next time. For more up-to-the-minute coverage of military and defense news, head over to our websites at Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps Times.com and DefenseNews.com. And if you want to be even more ahead of the information curve, subscribe to our Early Bird Brief newsletter for top headlines in your inbox every morning. And make sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And when we come back, did you know the British and Canadians outnumbered the Americans in the invasion force on D-Day? Neither did we until recently. But our history expert is here to clear up some common wartime myths when we return. Welcome back. Since the release of Saving Private Ryan, we all think we know a thing or two about the invasion of Normandy, France in World War II. But do we? There are a lot of myths surrounding the D-Day invasion, and HistoryNet's Claire Barrett is here to bust them up. Take it away, Claire.
On June 6, 1944, a little more than 78 years ago, over 160,000 Allied troops were sent across the English Channel onto the beaches of Normandy, France. The ensuing operation, Operation Overlord, known in the US as D-Day, was the first of many in the fight to liberate Western Europe from Hitler's grasp. After 78 years, the largest amphibious operation in history has become saturated with numerous tales of valor and lore, but not all of them are true. Today, we are breaking down fact from fiction, myth from verity. First up, myth number 1. D-Day was a predominantly American effort. A lot of Americans think of Normandy invasion as largely an American endeavor. An American, Dwight D. Eisenhower, was in charge, and a lot of heavy casualties were suffered by the US troops. But while 73,000 Americans were involved in Operation Overlord, some 83,115 British and Canadian troops also took part. 61,715 of them were British. Of the 1,213 warships involved, just 200 were American and 892 were British. And of the 4,126 landing craft involved, 805 were American and 3,261 were British. Indeed, 31% of all US supplies used during D-Day came directly from Britain. while 2/3 of the 12,000 aircraft involved were also British. So while it looms large in the American mind that D-Day was an American battle, in fact, we were just part of it. Myth number 2, the Germans were better trained than Allied soldiers. Were the Germans a better trained force than the American troops at the start of the war? Sure, but by 1944, not so much. According to historian James Holland, there were few exceptions, such as the Panzerlehr, for example. But for the most part, German units were certainly not as well trained as the Allies. By June 6, 1944, there were some Allied units that had been training for 4 years to fight in the European theater, whereas many German troops had had little more than a few weeks prep before heading to the front. The Kampfgruppen, or battle groups, which were ad hoc units traditionally seen to showcase their tactical flexibility, were actually born of extreme shortages and desperation towards the end of the war. And let's not forget the Eastern European conscripts that were forced to defend the Atlantic Wall. Myth number 3, the Allied coalition was in sync. As the US commitment to overlord grew, so too did the British inferiority complex. After World War II ended, British Lieutenant General Frederick Morgan wrote to famed British historian Liddell Hart that the infighting between the Allies was becoming frightening. According to American historian Edward Gordon and British author David Ramsay, the clash of personalities between key military commanders hindered the optimal gains from Normandy invasion and needlessly lengthened the war. But, as British Prime Minister Winston Churchill once said, there is only one thing worse than fighting with allies, and that is fighting without them. So, while the invasion was a triumph on some level of a massive logistical and military operation, was it perfectly coordinated machine that we all think of? The truth is a little trickier than that.
And that's all we have time for this week. Please visit us on militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more coverage. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.